another $35 a month or something. $5,000 left because you're saving it for something.
The Muscatine City Council will come to order. Fran, would you do a roll call, please?
Councilmembers Raywalt.
Here.
Fitzgerald.
Present.
Natfig.
Present.
Shahadi.
Present.
Bynum.
Present.
Phillips. Present. Spread.
President.
All present, Your Honor.
Very good, Fran.
We don't care on the second Thursday.
Folks, this is an in-depth session tonight, but we do have an action item to start with, which is item number 2. There is a request to approve an outdoor dining on the public right-of-way from the Guadalajara. Is there a motion to approve that?
So move.
We'll give that to Bob in a
I'll
second.
second.
Bill, all those in favor, or any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Okay, item number 3 on tonight's agenda is a sidewalk policy review. I believe, Brandy, that's you?
While Randy's making his way up, handed this out, I believe it was last month's in-depth session
It was.
for city council to take a look at. Bi-State worked with city staff on preparing the sidewalk policy. Hope you've had a chance to take a look at it. I guess we're really here for questions tonight. Randy, you want?
That's pretty much it, Council. We did at the April 9th meeting, we talked about it. Asked you to take a look at the overall policy. It complements the new sidewalk work that we're planning on doing that will be coming at you next week with award of a contract. This policy addresses 3 things, new sidewalks, existing sidewalks, and ADA ramps. And if the policy is adopted, then we'll push on with the new sidewalk program as we started this year. With the existing sidewalk program, we'll have to come back with a plan for you as far as inspections, how we go about doing that. It takes some logistics work on our part, but it's nothing that can't be done. So for the most part, that's what the policy is about, council, and I can get into real nitty-gritty specifics if you want me to, but, okay. Any questions?
One quick one at least, Randy. Do we, at this point, don't have much of a handle on how many of the sidewalks would be in the priority one or category one, you know, the ones that,
No.
No, we'll have to implement the inspection program.
Before we really know.
That'll be part two, and that'll be over a period of years. I believe we gave ourselves up to 10 years in the program. It doesn't necessarily mean it would take that long, but obviously, we'll, you know, utilizing existing staff and doing the inspection and interns and so on and so forth, we'll need to go through on a regular basis, similar to what we do with the Community Development Office and our nuisance abatement program, where we try and hit portions of the community and go through, but trying to
Yeah,
do that
just
on
a
regular
reminder,
basis.
for the last 20 years, we've
Not
been
done.
reacting instead of being proactive on this, and so that's been the extent of our sidewalk inspection
it'll be a
program.
bit of an unknown as far as how much.
But I think the policy reflects our practices, at least in recent years. And from my perspective, we've been on an annual basis tackling the ADA portions, we've had an intern that completed a portion of the ADA ramp inspection and documentation process. We'll do something similar with the sidewalk program that the department put together with the GIS layers, and being able to go out there, take a photo of it, indicate where it's located and what the issue is, be able to issue a letter to the adjacent property owner. So all of the technical pieces are pretty much in place. It's just a matter of implementing the plan.
Carrying it out, yeah,
I agree.
thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Hill, while you're there, another subject, when do you think they might be done with the Cedar Street roundabout?
Oh, another subject, okay. August at the latest.
What? Well, I
With
mean,
Cedar
when do you
Street.
think?
June 4th is the date that,
The question was when the Cedar Street, that implies when are they going to do with the project, be done with the project. That's what it says to me. We ought to be done with that project this summer. Now, when will they be opening up Cedar Street again? You know, originally it was scheduled for June 4th, but last week we had a lot of rain, and it's going to push that schedule back a little bit. The contractor has been encouraged to get back on site, and and the way it works is that they have so many days to get the project done, or else they have to start paying liquidated damages because it's federally funded, or a portion of it. And he got charged with a working day on Tuesday. It was a nice day and nobody was there. And so he got charged with a working day. And I saw that they were out there yesterday and they were out there today until it started raining again. Part of the problem in just this past week has to do with the fact that they've been doing a lot of earthwork, grading, prepping actually for the trail that goes in on the north side. Well, you know, it gets sloppy, muddy, and they can't do that. But there is still quite a bit of work to be done. There is the roundabout itself to finish up. There are sidewalks to be poured. There's a bioswale to be constructed. So, I mean, there's work, and time is money to contractors. So if they don't get out there to get it done, they don't get paid. And if they don't get out there to get it done within the right amount of time, then they start paying us back. So the best answer, Mike, is that the project, we look to see it done this summer in August. As far as Cedar Street being opened back up again, I would think that sometime in early June. But, you know, things can change on that too.
Yeah, I know they can't work the soil when it's wet and muddy and crappy, that's for sure. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
anyone else, council? Thanks, Randy.
You're welcome, man.
Next item on tonight's agenda would be item number 4, zoning update as it pertains to off-street parking regulations. Andrew?
Yeah, it should be. The remote's right in the door there.
Oh, well, while I try to get some base, this will be the first of the draft chapters of the new zoning ordinance that I'll be reviewing with you. Planning and Zoning Commission has already reviewed this chapter. Just to kind of quickly breeze over this part, the whole reason for updating the zoning ordinance is our current one dates from 1974 and implements the 1968 comprehensive plan. So we have a new comprehensive plan from 2013, and now we're going through the process to update the zoning code to implement this vision. First chapter we're tackling is the one that deals with off-street parking, and one of the major changes that's being proposed is to consolidate all the parking regulations into one chapter. Currently, we have them spread over 18 separate chapters within the zoning ordinance. The number of required parking spaces is set by the type of land use, which is similar to the way we do it now. One of the changes is we're going from about 10 defined land uses to about 40, to just a little under 40. And the other major change is it's going to be requiring less parking spaces over a large swath of these.
Why was it necessary to be so expansive with the number of,
Yeah. Go from 10 to 40.
yeah, that's a big, seems like a big move.
Well,
There's some logic, I assume, but.
The logic is the more specific you can define a type of land use rather than just retail, but the specific types of retail. I mean, you think of kind of the broad of what that can mean in terms of what they need for parking. Basically, one of the guiding principles of this entire rewrite is we don't want to require more parking than's actually required. There's been a lot of research to survey requiring more parking than you need is quite harmful to a community. It drives up project costs, it wastes land, and it's particularly bad to the visuals because usually the unused portions of the parking lot are typically the ones that are along the street. So as you drive the community, you know, that's what your view, that's kind of what the streetscape is the vacant portions of parking lots.
So is this modeled after some national standard?
Yeah, this is kind of, these are kind of looking at what current best practices are as opposed to best practices in the early 70s. So there's obviously been a lot of research and a lot learned since then. And to further provide flexibility, we've written a process in there where an applicant can essentially appeal these and further reduce the number if they can provide certain documentation to show that, no, this is the only number of parking spots they'll need, and that's up to 50%. So that's to give us more flexibility, and this is based off a model that's been implemented successfully in a number of other communities.
Okay, thank you.
So if I don't like the 40 different choices that I have, I can modify any one of those 40 to fit my own needs by
Appeal.
appealing.
Right, and I think a lot, and where this will probably be is the last one on there is like any other use not listed, one parking space for 300 square feet of your building, which, you know, that might make sense in one case, but be wildly off in the other. And if you can come in and show that why you only need 20 spaces based on, you know, the number of seats you have in your restaurant or whatever, something that's actually documentable, then go ahead and reduce it down.
Does it take in consideration what that property could be used
will.
for? Because it may have a purpose
Yeah.
right now that only requires 5, but that if it's zoned correctly and so
Right.
forth, something else could move in that now needs 20.
So with a change of use and change of ownership, the rules could change for that,
On the-
for
Well,
that parcel.
that's no different now. If you're going from one category to another, you may have to put in more parking spaces.
Yeah. Just asking.
Stormwater's another side of that.
Right, and we're going to get into stormwater quite a bit more, and that's the other reason why, one of the major reasons you don't want to require more parking than you need is it makes the stormwater problem a lot worse, is you're trying to minimize the amount of impervious surfaces that you have. The other thing that's kind of a change from what we have now is we've added in all the ADA standards. This is standards that you have to comply with now, but rather than having to look in city documents for the city standards and go pull the ADA standards from all the federal documents, we're kind of putting them all into, you go to one chapter, you know everything you have to do to build a parking lot. So that's to add to the ease of use. We also are updating the off-street loading requirements kind of in a similar manner where we've brought them into line with current best practices and added that flexibility to it. The other kind of minor change is to make the process to allow for shared parking between adjoining users, make that an easier process to go. The classic example of this is a church located next to an office building where they can share the parking lots because the times they need them they don't overlap. So we have this in there now, but it's kind of a cumbersome process. So we went and looked at some other communities and just see what was kind of best practice to make that a little easier to have people make use of. The other we're also adding clarity to the standards for the thickness, quality, and other technical features for the required paving. Get this question a lot as well, how thick do I need to pave my parking lot? And right now, the current code doesn't provide much guidance in this, so this is again where we kind of found best practices and kind of common standards in other communities and written that in there to make this a little easier. Then another fairly major change is changing the actual size of the parking space. Currently, we require parking spaces to be 9 by 20 feet, which is kind of an unusual standard, particularly in the length. If you look at what other communities require, 20 feet is quite excessive, and I could only find, out of the dozens of ordinances that I looked at, I could only find one other community that had a 20-foot length. So what we're proposing to switch it to is to 9.5 by 18, and this is for two reasons. One is you're reducing the size of the parking space by 5%, which saves over multiple parking spaces, saves on the size of the parking lot. But while you're reducing the size of it, you're actually increasing the width of it, which we think is actually going to be more useful to people than having a longer parking space, particularly for the elderly, the disabled, and people with children to get in and out of their cars. So this kind of
Was there a requirement for the distance between the back sides of the parking?
Yeah, there's aisle width requirements in there.
Okay.
And that depends on, those change based on the angle that you have your parking spot on. And once again, those are based on best practices.
Because when you take that 20 down to an 18, now you're the length of my van. And if there's somebody in another van parked right behind and don't have enough space, it's tough to get
I'm
back
pretty,
up.
I'm pretty comfortable with the 18. That seems to be almost a universal standard anymore.
Okay.
So.
Okay, adding to the width will help.
And then the feedback that we got on parking from the comprehensive plan process is that in general, the parking, a lot of parking lots in town are unattractive, and one of the things that people really wanted to see were parking lots that were a little more dressed up in terms of landscaping. And so to kind of reflect this desire of the community, proposing a requirement that within a parking lot, you need to have 10%, an area equal to 10% of the total size kind of set aside for landscaping, typically in the form of islands and things. And we have some specific requirements for islands, planted islands, that on the end of each row there'd be a planted island, and that there'd be no more than 15 spaces before there's an island that intervenes. And this will provide a much more attractive streetscape. And as I'll get into in a minute, it also provides a way to better address stormwater issues. We're proposing to require bioretention systems to help manage stormwater running off parking lots. Bioretention, other names for this kind of things are rain gardens, bioswales. Essentially, they're areas that are lower than the surrounding area where the water, you can see the picture where the water runs in, and they're designed where the water then infiltrates into the ground, which does two things. It drastically reduces the amount of runoff that's coming out of the parking lot and increases the quality of the water that's running off the parking lot. And so this is kind of a rising best practice.
I can understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. I like the visual appeal. I can understand the stormwater issues, but I'm wondering how that impacts the cost of a project. I mean, is there a way to benchmark this and say that all of these recommendations are going to drive the cost of development up, say 10, 12, 15%?
I can look in, one way we did try to address that is you will have to do this. This will be an added cost compared to where we're at now. But where it kind of comes off is that you'll be building probably a smaller parking lot. So you know, if there's something you want some more information, I can get better numbers on that and
Yeah.
get back to you with it. I'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Might be interesting to also factor in stormwater. A lot of communities are implementing stormwater, what's the term I'm looking for?
Recycling.
I'm sorry?
Recycling?
No, stormwater utilities. So if you don't go this direction, a lot of communities where you have the increased impermeable service, they're implementing stormwater utilities where you're essentially taxed for the more impermeable
Impervious.
service, I can't talk, service that you have. This is one way to offset that and increase and improve your stormwater management.
And the other reason that we're looking at doing this is that for a lot of communities, it hasn't been us yet, is the EPA requires a discharge permit for stormwater, and they're getting to smaller and smaller communities. So that's something that we're probably gonna have to deal with at some point.
Today, that does not apply to us, but.
That
it
does
will.
not apply to us today, but the
It's
thinking
coming.
is the sooner we have this in place, the easier it's gonna be for us to comply and deal with that when it does hit. We couldn't give you an exact time, but I'm sure, I would guess sometime in the next decade, that'll be something we're forced into.
Starting off a lot.
And the technical standards for building these, we're gonna require that we're citing the Iowa Stormwater Management Manual, which is a document developed by the IDNR and which contain, essentially kind of like building code, where it kind of contains all the technical standards on how they should be constructed, and all those particular technical details. The other major change over how we deal with parking now is for the first time, we're gonna require that bike parking be provided. And it'll be based off of how many parking spaces you have. So I think up to 20 spaces, you're required provide one bike parking space, and then it go on. So it kind of steps up from there. That's in the document that I provided, those exact numbers. And it also provides the standards for how this should be accomplished. Two major reasons for doing this. One is kind of fits in with the overall goal of making it easier for people to travel around the community by non-motorized means. I mean, obviously, if you want people to bike to their destination, you need to give them a way to secure and store their bike once they get there. And the other one is it complements a lot of the investments that we've made in bike trails and other bicycle facilities, is that we want to encourage people to use them and, you know, achieve more value off those investments. And so broadly speaking, that's what we're proposing for the parking requirements in the new zoning ordinance. So I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments you might have on that.
Are there any regulations about, and I, and I use them as, in my opinion, a good example, H&I's property over here, the area between their parking and the street, they have trees and they have shrubs and it's nicely landscaped, and in their park, they may not have it in their parking lot like what you have some of these, but they're creating a nice visual barrier from their industrial property to
Yeah,
the rest
We
of the
would count that
city.
in that part of that 10% if it's that between their parking lot and the public right of way, like H&I is a good example of that.
Okay, so, but it's not specific that it'll be a barrier between land uses?
No, I mean, one of the things I did try to do with this, when putting this together, is provide for flexibility, so it's not super prescriptive in the design.
Yeah.
It's just that, I think particularly with the landscaping is that just don't want a featureless flat slab of concrete. It's what we kind of want to get away from with this.
Okay.
Anyone else have questions for Andrew?
Thank you.
I'll get back to him what the cost of adding the bioswales would be.
By the way, you look nice tonight. Thank you. Okay, next item, number 5, review of proposed CVB structure. Is that Greg or Nick?
I'll start it off, and Nick is certainly here tonight and can answer any questions as well, but provide a brief summary. Started to look at updating the agreement between the CVB and the City of Muscatine, which is, we reviewed at budget time, is out of date at this point in time. And in completing and reviewing that process, it was discovered that the CVB is currently not a 501c3 as required as part of that agreement. And based on that discovery, Nick began to do a little investigation and worked with Vicky Becky over at TD&T and discovered a few issues in the process. And basically, in reviewing her findings, I guess in summary, indicated that there were tax consequences with their current structure. And as such, in a couple aspects, interest is taxable, income over expenses could be taxable at the end of the fiscal year, which would basically require the CVB to expend all of that 25% that they receive from the city on an annual basis. And if you recall, in our earlier discussions, it was important that the CVB be able to grow that fund balance, be able to do one-time expenditures and additional, larger items in the future or projects or whatever that may be, or allocations for events into the community. And as such, they would not be able to grow their fund balance. They'd be required to, for income and expenses to balance at the end of the fiscal year. The board met this week and is recommending to the city council that the makeup of the board, it's currently an independent board, that we move towards a city board going forward. This would alleviate all of the issues that we've talked about to date, and it would essentially, at the end of the day, it's going to look and feel like it does. If you recall, the CVB follows our budget process. They use our financial policies and procedures, our purchasing policies and procedures. Nick is hired through the city of Muscatine today, so it
he's a
looks
city
and
employee.
feels, yes. He's a
Is he a-
CVB employee hired through the city of Muscatine.
We do the HR.
We do all of the HR, yes, and the financial aspects as well. So it looks and feels like a city board today. The biggest difference going forward is based on the board's discussion and next review. It seems to make sense to condense the membership. At this point in time, Nick, you have 20, how many board?
16.
18. It was condensed from 20, around 25, 26, I believe, initially, or 20, in the 20s. It's down to 18. The bylaws call for 16. We'd probably bring it down to 7 or 9, more consistent with the Park and Rec board. So at the end of the day, from my perspective, and I think generally it was a unanimous recommendation of the board that we begin the process of dissolution of the board and move forward, creating a city board or commission. In your packet, you have an example, Cedar Falls, which provides a pretty good example of what that ordinance would look like. Next steps include the CVB would have to take official action, notice to the board members, and would have to take formal action to dissolve. The board, city council would have to concur with that, and then we'd establish an ordinance similar to the one in the packet. Before proceeding with that, I just wanted to make sure that the council was okay to proceed with that in that direction. Really, at the end of the day, it's going to look and feel and operate much like it does today. There's not a whole lot of difference that you see. Biggest difference other than the board size is that for their larger expenditures like the Convention and Visitors Bureau magazine that's done on an annual basis would have to come before the city council, just like other larger expenses other departments have. Beyond that, it's going to look and feel much the same as it does today.
Is there any, and I assume that talking with the accountant, they've thought of all kinds of methods, but is there any way to take the additional proceeds at whatever's left at the end of the year and make a donation to the city? Can the city hold those funds for CVB and thereby eliminate any
What Nancy's
liability?
What Nancy suggested is that we just simply hold the last payment this fiscal year, and because at this point in time, it looks like they've got sufficient income to cover expenditures, and then just make up that payment at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Basically spend it down to zero.
Spend it down to zero so there's no tax consequences.
Because that would have been my question is if you dissolve the 501c3, you file a final 10990.
Right.
What happens to the money? And I'm assuming the IRS would want a chunk of that, but
We want to ensure.
fully fund it?
We want to ensure that there is no tax consequence going forward. So we, it seems to make sense to hold that last payment and then make that payment after the board is established or after July 1st into that account.
The other thing that came up in the meeting was the board makeup would be still similar to the way it is now, with a cross-section of people that are experts in, or less, in tourism-related industries and such, that, so it still should be effective board-wise.
It's going to look and feel much, again, it's going to look and feel almost exactly like it today, like it does today, only it's a smaller board, and they'll have to come to the city council, have to, but, a couple additional times if they have larger expenditures, like the
Like a
magazine.
visitor center or something like that.
But, and it'll be part of the capital improvement plan at some point in the future, if they'd like to establish a visitor center, that would follow through the capital improvement plan. But it's really going to operate much the same that it does today.
So would that be a standalone department then?
Yes, it'd be, that's the recommendation, it'd be standalone. You already review their budget on an annual basis, they already follow the exact procedures that all of the other departments operate under. It's really, at the end of the day, it looks and feels like one essentially today, and it's essentially wholly public funded, the majority of that funding from the city, small portion from the county.
So you're looking for consensus from council?
If there's no objection, we'll proceed along those lines. And before you go there, I just want to make sure that, if Nick has any comments or if you have any questions for Nick, he's certainly here tonight.
Anyone on council object?
So is there any other way to work this out to where it stays an autonomous board and to avoid the tax consequences?
Becky attended the other night. It didn't appear that there was an option to avoid the potential for taxes on an annual basis.
Maybe fixed to zero.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you.
All right, let's move forward. Item 6, comments from council members. Councilman Raywalt.
Nothing tonight,
Bill?
Mr. Mayor.
Nothing at this time, Your Honor.
Scott?
I have nothing, Your Honor, thank you.
Osama?
I have nothing tonight. Thank you, Your Honor.
Bob?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Jeanette?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Tom?
Nothing this evening, Your Honor?
Fran?
Oh, I have nothing tonight, Your Honor. Thank you for asking.
Greg?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Well, let me add something then. I want to say happy anniversary to my lovely wife.
Yay, Jill.
Any other business, folks? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. We go to closed session?
Closed session?
No.